topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
It's Arthi with Light Up Your Life, and it's Friday, December the 10th, and I'm so happy to be with you all. I know for 2 weeks now we've had some pre-recordings for Thanksgiving Friday, and from last week I was traveling with my family, and I missed being here, of course, but I also think it's important to take some time and fill up our cups. And so we're going to be talking about that today, filling up cups with self-care as our topic. But a couple of different happenings. The first is I want to remind everyone to be patient and gentle and humble with yourself, especially in the month of December. You know, we talk about busyness. I think there's just so many chapters that close in December. It's the end of the fiscal year for businesses and for a lot of people who are trying to get organized with things and putting closure on things. And of course, with the holidays. And I also want you to take some time to remember how many people are grieved during the holidays for somebody that they've lost. Or the breakup of a relationship. And so I just want you all to be mindful of your community and your family, and just to take that humble grace of being with them and checking in with them. I think we often forget how important it is to check in those significant periods. And the holidays are big for people who have lost someone, because it holds so many traditions and so much of that family component. So just a quick friendly reminder on that. Check in with your loved ones. And I also wanted to share that during the last 2 weeks, I myself got off a little bit of my own train on how I start off my mornings. And you can tell when you're a little bit off balance. And I could tell because I was a little short-tempered with some things that were happening in my surroundings. And I realized exactly what was happening. I wasn't giving myself those 20 minutes in the morning. And so we'll be talking with our special guest today about why self-care is important, what it does for us, and how it can really change the trajectory of life in general. For ourselves, our family, which then, of course, becomes our neighborhood, then into our community, and then, back all the way up, scaling up to the global world. And there is a book that I keep mentioning that it is on my read, but it just came out in November with Shelley Tagalski. I hope I'm saying her name right, but it's the idea behind sit down to rise up. And so sitting down is not just like chilling and watching a movie, right? Sit down. She's talking about the art of like reflective mindfulness and meditation. And I know a lot of us struggle with meditation. It's just the idea of just closing your eyes for a few minutes and catching your breath, how that can transform our health, our happiness quotient, and everything else. So I wanted you all to know that. And a couple of things happening. There is an institute on relationships called the Gottman Institute, and those of you who are clinicians probably know about John Gottman's work with relationships and marriage, and how really there's this component of how we can take care of relationships is by giving them time and connectivity. And so I am going through a workshop to be able to facilitate um, a, a couples workshop, and I will be able to do that online too. So that's going to be an offering coming up, because I really believe the more that we can focus on that healthy at home network, which then transfers to happy parents, we can literally, with the component of mindfulness, I think we can really start to change the trajectory of people not being happy and us having this violence in the world. And I think we just need to start realizing where we need to put our time and energy. So, all of these great things that I want to share with you. And I'm so excited about today's topic. And today's special guest um, is Tanya. And we just talked about your last name, Tanya. We come on and say I'm gonna chop it up again, even though I should know how to pronounce it. But Tanya Jacqueline. I probably would have said it wrong. And Tanya is a life and leadership coach, and she coaches women, and actually she supports anyone that is looking for that journey in leadership, and all of her clients through finding purposeful meaning and joy. And Tanya holds people in a really collective space to be able to take on that coaching relationship. And she's a mama to two girls, and she's married and enjoys dancing and yoga and traveling. And she's a mama to two girls. Oh, am I getting an echo? Oh, I think I'm getting an echo. Sorry, Tanya. We'll figure out what's happening with I may need to wear some headphones off. And Tanya has been in the corporate sector, and she made the transition to going into coaching in 2020. And Tanya enjoys really helping that leadership role and helping different organizations and everything coming up in different facets. And Tanya is so passionate about self-care. She's run a really awesome workshop that I got to take a part of, and it really helped me, and I need that refresher again. So I think today will be a great conversation, because it is this continued pendulum that you have to get on and keep hopping back on, and you need that you need a supportive network to help you realize to get on that swing again. And so this is why I think I believe in it. I think she believes in it. And both of us will share the fact that we have to practice what you preach, and therefore, like, you have to have a discussion about it to start getting on your own journey on this continuation. And I think that's probably we'll talk a lot about why that is empowering for women to know that it changes with the ebbs and tides of life. So Tanya, um, let's hope when we are able to get on that my echo works. So one of the things that I have discovered when Tanya conducted her workshop, and the things that I had gone through, was a reflective exercise on what can I do in my day to make it to make it so that it's really linked together for me, to make it this personal journey for me. Because oftentimes we're looking for perfect amounts of time. We're looking for perfect amounts of time of doing self-care, right? Like it's like this allocated time. But indeed, when we had the discussion and she led her workshop, I was reminded that it's how we lead our journey through our day. So that comes through presence. And so I think we found that and especially now in this role for Tanya, being in the coaching relationship and being in that full embodiment of presence is huge. Tanya, do you hear an echo?
I was earlier, now I'm not. How is the sound? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. If there's an echo, let me, yeah. I think we're good. I think we're good. All right, Tanya, welcome.
Thank you so much, Arti. Thank you.
So, Tanya, okay. Sometimes we have technical difficulties, right? This morning I had one with Zoom and go with the punches, right? Okay. Is that better, you all?
Yeah, technical difficulties definitely is a normal thing. It's a part of life these days now, right?
Yeah, and I thought, I think about it, Tanya. We had hiccups on the telephone when we had static. Do you remember the very first when we used to have when the cell phones first came on and how much static there? I mean, there's still times there's static depending on if you're in the mountains or whatever, or some places when we were driving we'd have two signal bars, right? So I think it's just the idea that sometimes we become impatient because it happens a little more often because we're on the technology more often, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think you're right. And I think sometimes we just get used to it just being able to work. And sometimes we take for granted that it's going to work. And then when it doesn't.
Yes. Yes. So, Tanya, can you share your incredible journey, your own journey? Because going from, and I call it the corporate world because that's where, I always call anyone who works in that world corporate, but I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but can you share your journey of how that looked and where you are now um, and how this has become your passion?
Yeah, I would love to, Arti. Yeah, no, it is the corporate world. I call it the corporate world too. I come from the corporate space. I spent a little over 15 years in the consulting space, working with clients and in that kind of corporate space. And really, my journey started, when it got to a point where I don't necessarily like to call it burnout, but it really was, right? I was spread in so many different directions. I loved my job. I was passionate about it. But when I had my kids, my priorities shifted a little bit, right? I had more responsibilities, I had different things, and just my priorities shifted, right? What is it going to look like to work full time and have my kids and do those things that are really important to me? Um, and so I went through a lot of different things on that. What does it look like to take care of myself, right? When I realized that that's what was needed, I needed to be taking care of myself. I was taking care of everybody else. I was taking care of my kids. I was taking care of my family, my home, my job. And I started finding myself falling to the bottom of the list. And I was always tired. I was lethargic. I was on autopilot. I often say I was just on autopilot. It was just go, go, go. And when someone once told me health is wealth, and that still sits with me, I still refer to it because it truly, at the time when I heard it, it was like the time that I needed to hear it. I was always getting sick. I had made a visit to the ER because I had had a major migraine. Like a really bad migraine. And I just needed to hear that. And then I started taking a look at okay, how do I take better care of myself? What does that look like for me? How do I make time for myself and still be able to show up for all the things that are important to me, right? And so I started doing that. I started trying to find time, little ways, simple ways to be able to do that for myself. And honestly, when I look at when I came into coaching, professional coaching, I'm so thankful that I had to started on that journey for myself of taking care of myself. What does that look like? Because job wise, I had made a switch to a different job, and then I got let go after 6 months after being at that job. And that was just really hard to take in. I had worked for so long. I had been so loyal to my companies. I loved working. I enjoyed my job, all those things. But I will say I had the resilience to kind of navigate through that change because I took some time. I had the tools, right? I had been figuring out what does it look like to take care of myself? What does that look like? And that was a time when I started looking at like, okay, what do I want to do now? Right. I've spent so much time in the corporate world. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, there are these other things that I'm realizing I enjoy doing. So I took a pause during that time to figure out, okay, what's next for me? And then I discovered the professional coaching industry and that, I could help other women, navigate their own journey and kind of figure out what does it look like for them? How do they take care of themselves? How do they even define success for themselves in the corporate world, in the business world, but then also personally, right? They get to kind of create that life for them. So I got super excited about that. And that's kind of where my journey with coaching started. I went to a coach training school. I got my certification, and I feel like I'm just exactly where I'm supposed to be. So that's kind of the journey that landed me to where I am right now with coaching and working with women and really serving and supporting others as they kind of navigate their own journey. We're all on this journey and it looks different for each one of us. But really getting people to realize that they can create what it looks like for them and what works for them. So that's just a little bit about my journey.
Thank you, Tanya. There's a couple of things that you were saying. Health is wealth. I'm glad you brought that up because the implications of not taking care of ourselves is the direct correlation with our health. The data is there and the research is there. And so that always sticks with me too. You also mentioned when we feel lethargic and tired, and that is the beginning of what happens when we don't take care of ourselves, and the grumpiness and the shortness, because women, I'm not trying to be sexist, but I do think women have a really high tolerance of patience overall, especially when there's multiple hats that women wear in general. So when those things are happening, the snappiness for ourselves, for our family members, when we have like even those little minor pains and aches, that's all that we're on empty. So I'm glad you talked about health as wealth, because that's a big focus of why I think you're right. Like this topic is so critical. Like it is when we talk about critical, like it is a critical component.
It is a critical component. And you're right. I think too, realizing that grumpiness and that lethargy is kind of linked to not being able to take care of ourselves. That brings in a level of awareness, right? Like you also have to have that awareness that is kind of the linkage too. And sometimes I know for me, it was hard for me to see that, right? It was like, well, what do you mean I'm not taking care of myself? I'm eating, I'm drinking my water, I am doing all those things. I'm getting out of bed, I'm waking up, I'm taking a shower, I am taking care of myself, right? But it's just, our bodies and our minds and the things that are going on and the information that we're taking in, sometimes we're so much in it that we may not have that awareness that, oh, okay, but something is missing or there's an area that needs a little bit more attention, right? Even just pausing, like taking time to pause. When I say pause with a lot of my clients or even in the corporate space, it's really hard for them to just pause. That's that's tough. Pause or just be still is
Mhm.
hard. But sometimes that's what we need. We need to either or rest, right? Or even just like rest so that we can refill or kind of build up our almost like build up our reserves so that we have the energy, right, to show up and kind of do all the things that we want to do or that we need to do. So yeah, I love that you said it's critical. I agree wholeheartedly that it's so critical.
Yeah, I mean, so in this relationship model that I was just sharing earlier, that for the facilitation, I mean, I've always talked about love bank, right? You have to have a love bank, but then we have to talk about our own self love bank. I keep thinking, yes, we have someone taking a moment to breathe is so critical. Like it literally, that oxygen that you just need to shift and get rid of the carbon dioxide in our body, that breath work, we just, and I think it would come at a good juncture point because people, I think, and I'm bringing up American culture in general, that we're finally addressing that we're really a sick, and I am saying it, we're really a sick, toxic culture. Like we have killed, um, we have killed our brains and our bodies because we've been on autopilot for so long. You know, Google and some of these other companies should not be the only ones who are looking at taking lunch breaks that actually don't involve them checking their phone or having expectations during rest time. And Tanya, I thought about it this morning, and when I was driving, thinking of our conversation, I was thinking in so many parts of the world, I always say this, they have already for centuries built in time to rest. They take that 1 hour of lunch, they would close up their shops. I remember when we'd visit India, like the shops were closed from 12 to what, they would go home and eat with their families. I'm not saying that can happen for I'm saying it would be you're not glued to your phone eating and like checking your email. That's self-care too, the time that we are realizing we're always doing, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. It is. It is. It's so much about just even that connection and being present, right? Like allowing yourself, almost like giving yourself permission to be present with just one thing that you're doing. If it's a meal or if it's just one task, or yeah, shutting down the laptop, like you said, and focusing on one thing, that is definitely a form of self care. Um, and you said something too about, I think you said self-love, right? And Arthi, it's so true too. Like the way that we talk to ourselves is a form of self-care. Like what do you say to yourself when you do choose to rest, right? So say you are choosing time to rest. Are you telling yourself, no, but I should be doing this, and this? Or are you giving yourself grace in that, oh, my body is telling me I need to slow down, and that's okay. So I'm going to slow down so that then I have the energy to get back in as my whole self with my full energy to do whatever it is I need to do. Right. That's also a form of beautiful self-care, of like just the way that we talk to ourselves and allow ourselves, and really keeps coming up for me, like almost giving ourselves permission, because like you said, in our culture, at least here in American culture, rest is not something we value as much as, you know working really hard, or the whole idea, especially in the corporate space, right? And it's changing, though. It's shifting. A lot of companies are shifting, but the idea of like exhaustion is a badge of honor, right? So you pull an all-nighter and people the next day are like, oh my gosh, way to go, your first all night. I remember pulling my first all-nighter, and the next day people saying like, wow, you've been kind of, you've been welcomed into the group, right? Like you've kind of earned your, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a regular thing. I don't want to do this.
Yes. Oh my goodness, you're so right, right? You just said exhaustion, like it's, and you said a badge of honor, right? And so now, Tanya, I'm thinking the shift, like for even, I'll give myself an as example, like, so working till the point of exhaustion, you feel like it is a bad, because you've done it. I mean, I can tell you I haven't done it to this level, so then you have to find where to scale at different points in your life, but it's because we do value it in this culture, right? I always hear the question, "How do you do it all?" And all I say is, "We all have balls we're juggling, and I'm telling you right now, something's giving, right?" So I can, and I'm, and you know what's giving? It's that personal self care. I can honestly tell you, right? Today, when I tell you all the different hats, that's what's the piece. So that's what falls apart for people. Something in their self care program, I have decided, and I call it program. Their self care model, I think, is what falls apart for everyone. It just looks different. That's all. I have decided that's my theory. Oh, everyone, I apologize. I didn't mention Tanya and I are having a little lag, and that's why it, we are totally talking, but it's just that there's a lag between our internet connection.
Yeah, Arthi, no, I mean, I appreciate you mentioning to the viewers too, because I'm there's a little bit of a delay, but I think you're exactly right that like the self care program, something has to give, right? But we get to choose, right? We get to choose kind of where we get to flex or what gives, and oftentimes you're right. Like sometimes it's our own personal self care. Um, so I think too, it's being aware of that and consciously choosing that, okay, I'm choosing to do this versus take care of myself right now. Or what are some simple ways I realized, I know I need to take care of myself. What are some simple ways? Or I've been talking about habits recently a whole lot. Like, what are some new habits, right? That focus on taking care of yourself, right? Um, that help you, one, to feel good, one, to kind of like feel energized. And it doesn't have to be something grand. I keep coming back to, if it's simple, it's much more likely to be done, right? So is it a few minutes to take a few deep breaths, right? Or to take some calming breaths. Earlier this year, I was actually doing this program where we've been using it in the corporate space, but helping professionals with like mindfulness. What does that look like? And doing it consistently throughout the day. And it's like 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, like over maybe 5 or 7 times throughout the day, and just focusing on your breath. Like 2 minutes, you set the timer, right? I know we're all busy, there's a lot going on, but you set the timer and you just focus on your breath, like the inhale, exhale. Or you look at an object, right? You use one of your senses. And again, 2 minutes, right? Like that's not a lot of time, but it has such a huge impact, and like such a significant impact on how people feel, that I think we take it for granted, right?
So much. I mean, I always say, like, when you do close your eyes for those 2 minutes, it's like you're on a natural high when you get up. I mean, you like, do you ever look at your face in the mirror when you do it? Or I'm sorry, on Zoom? Because I leave this session, I'm like, gosh, I actually look really refreshed. Because of the fact that you're getting to that beautiful space of that subconscious, unconscious, which where else can you tap into that? Because when you're asleep, or the only place that you can truly be there in that place. And I'd have to do research because I don't know what the comatose state, what no one wants to go there. But I'm just saying the idea behind a good lie, like a good comatose of what closing your eyes looks like in a really good reflective space. I mean, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes I think while I'm talking to you, I'm like, actually, I need to give myself credit for taking, at least doing that part. Sure, the exercise needs to start again, and it needs to be like ASAP, but am I still taking those breaths? Am I still breathing and closing my eyes? So that's where I think it comes to self-care too. You and I have discussed that when you ran your workshop. Like, we have to start acknowledging each step. Like, we're always trying to we're always looking at the summit of the mountain all the time. What about what you are? What about what we are doing right?
Yeah, and I love that you bring that up, Arthi, because exactly right. Like, why can't we should acknowledge what we are doing, right, and recognize and kind of celebrate it, because that also then builds momentum and creates also motivation to make more time for it, right? So it's almost like, let's just start where we are. Just recognize, don't beat yourself up. Don't say, oh my gosh, okay, I didn't do this and I didn't do that, I didn't do that. Okay, well, let's just focus on, what did I do? What am I doing? What, and then, if you're ready to explore, okay, what do I want to do more of, right? And then going there. But come from a place of like feeling a sense of like just being proud that, okay, like you even just shared, I love watching you even just talk about like, well, I should be proud of myself that I'm doing these breathing exercises. Like even your face shifted a little bit, like there's like a smile that came on your face, because you should be proud of yourself. It's not always easy. There's so many things that you're doing and you wear so many hats, and that takes intention. It takes intention to take some time and focus, because the benefits of it, right? So agree with you 100%. Like celebrate what you are doing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And Tanya, like it's this shift that has to happen all the time. I'm realizing I don't know if you feel this way, and but it's like I have those days where it's like weeks on end that it's going so well. I'm giving myself that half an hour, right? But I will tell you, as much as the vacation is great, we got back last week. I'm derailed a little bit. So now it's again, like humble grace and be patient. And then while I just said, okay, so I have been closing my eyes in the middle of the day, right? So then acknowledgement. But I think it's so easy to fall in our cyclical trap of negative self-talk, beating ourselves up. And then that's why I love coaching, like you talk about too, or having these conversations, because then it opens you up to being like, wait, monkey mind needs to get off the tree, right? And so I can start again in a different lens.
Yeah, exactly. And I can relate so much to that too, Arthi, of things going so well for consistently for a period of time, and then something shifts and something changes, right? I mean, vacation is the perfect example. I've had some similar examples the last few months. Like we go off on a vacation, all the routines are kind of thrown out the windows, the kids are have different routines, all of that, right? I think you said something so important that I think is also a form of self-care. Is like giving yourself grace, right? Acknowledging, okay, well, we were just on vacation. We were in a different space. We were in a different routine. Of course, things are going to be thrown off a little bit. But now I get to, okay, rejigger. Do I go back and do what I was doing, or do I try something different? I know for me, what's like helped is like to anchor to one thing that I know for sure I can do for myself, right? Even as I'm trying to get kind of back on, get back on the bicycle, right? Of like getting back into the regular routines. What's like one thing? Sometimes I've even like made notes to myself of like, just go back to the basics, Tanya. Just go back to the basics. Is it just making sure I drink water today and like this much water? Let me just focus there. One thing, right? Until, you kind of build up the energy and you build up the capacity to create a different routine, or to go back to the routine that you were used to that was working for you, right? But I think it's so important. I think you said it, like just give yourself grace, right? Like,
yes. And Tanya, the fact is, I don't know why we as women are not patient in this boat of like, it's going to change. It's going to look different. So like the yoga pose that I did yesterday, that we all know, that yoga is one of those ebbs and tides when our body is different at different points. It is going to look different. So why wouldn't your self-care regimen look different? Like I haven't quite grappled the idea of, and people who are very regimented too can share when they beat themselves up when they don't do it, right? So I'm thinking, Oh my gosh, I'm not even someone who's very, very disciplined, so I can't imagine. I'm like, imagine what it looks like for someone who is disciplined and then something changes with how they have, okay, this is I have finally designed a program or something I believe in, but bam, it's gone, right? So that's why I really appreciate when you talk about the fact of like what is that anchor or the simple things that you come back to every day, right? Or every like moment. So back to this presence.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, things change, we change, our surroundings change, like our routines change, right? Um, it's this whole idea of like change is constant, right? Like it's just part of it. But but I think we're people like that enjoy routine, like just as humans, right? Or like routine is helpful, like, but I think that's also just what's really important. And I think you said it, someone that's very disciplined or regimented, that may really throw them off, right? But it's also important to build that awareness of like what you need, right? Are you a disciplined, regimented person, that's what helps you show up as the best version of yourself, or that's what helps you flourish, right? So it's important for you to consider, okay, what does that look like for me? Like one day could look like this, one day could look like that, but what does that discipline look like? What does that mean to you? Whereas someone else may not work well with something so disciplined and regimented, right? Like every day I'm not going to do these 4 things. Or, morning routines, for example. I'm not going to do the exact same thing every morning, right? Like that doesn't work for me. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do, but it's building that awareness to acknowledge, okay, well, what works for me, because we're all a little bit different, but building that awareness. And I think that starts with even just noticing, oh, I did that today and this is where my energy was, or this is how I felt. Maybe I should do that more regularly, or and just like noticing. I think it just starts with noticing.
Yes. Noticing is so critical. I mean, because then you so when you notice, then it's something that comes to your conscious, which means then you're like, hey, wait, let me like do an evaluation. Otherwise it's yeah, I mean, and I think again, it's such a powerful topic, but it has so many layers. Like for women who are, for example, let's take the holidays because we're right here in the heart of it. So oftentimes a lot of women do get burnt out during this time because they are doing what maybe some of the traditions have been, then they're trying to do what they believe in, then there's some of the societal expectations, and then they're also juggling the rest of the many hats, right? And then there's these parts that they have truly of wanting to do the joyful part of what they believe in. So then you have all these layers. And then something's got to give, right? Because yeah.
You're right. I mean, so many layers, and it's and you can't do it all, right? Because like you said, then that results in like burnout. Then you're not finding joy, you're not enjoying yourself, you're exhausted, you're tired, you're probably gonna need a vacation from the holidays. And let's be honest, like likely that's still going to happen, right? But just because there's all the things, but I do think it's like you said, like something's got to give, but I think consciously choosing what's going to give, like what are you going to let go of and be okay with, right? Like, okay, maybe I'm not going to do XY, all these things that we've done every single year or whatever. I'm okay with letting go of that, and the focus is going to be here, right? So like consciously choosing, I do think helps, right? I know for me it's helped, and I've kind of done my own work of like realizing like, okay, it's okay. This is where the focus is going to be. This is where we're going to spend our time and energy, because there's only so much of it, right? And then that allows you to be like present with whatever it is you chose versus doing all the things and then not necessarily enjoying it or not like being fully present for it, right? So consciously, I think consciously choosing and knowing that if you let go of something, and that goes back to the self-talk, right? It's okay because then you're focusing on this. It's not like you're losing something. It's like you're just filling it up with things that you've right now chosen is important to you. This is where you want to focus your time, your energy, and your attention on, right? And so it's that like level of just awareness that bringing to it, I think sometimes also helps. And then going back to what we were talking about, like self-talk, right? Like saying, okay, I'm choosing to focus on this versus I can't do this because I've got all these things, though I really want to do it. Well, okay, but if you really want to do it, then what do you need to let go of in order to be able to do it? You know, it's that like kind of that talk in our head that we all kind of, I'm sure, go through at some point.
Yes. And the idea that it's like such a delicate dance. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a, like, in order not to step on your own toes, right? Like, you have to figure out what is it that needs to be taken out, or like performing surgery on yourself. Like, what do I need to extrapolate just a little so that that other part doesn't necessarily fall out, which means you have to literally talk to yourself to figure it out. What do I need in this moment? What do I need in my day? What do I need from my family? What do I need from others?
Exactly, Arti. And I think sometimes even all those questions that you just asked or kind of walked through, that's all a form of self-care, right? Like taking a time to kind of think through all those things and then taking action from that place versus not making the time, right? I think that that's a form of self-care. But I know for me, I didn't necessarily always put that in the self-care bucket, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, but that is a form of self-care. And I think sometimes we get into the thing of like, oh, well, I'm not taking care of myself because I'm not doing all those things. Yeah, but if you're pausing and asking those questions, even asking those questions of like, what's important to me, or where do I want to focus on, that is a form of self-care. You're like taking care of your kind of your mental state, your emotional state, right? Like, how do you feel? How do you want to feel? How do I calm my mind, right? If it's like there's so many things going on, that is a form of self-care. And I think sometimes our society doesn't necessarily see it, right? Or necessarily put it in the bucket of self-care.
That's such a good point. Because for so long, and I'm not saying it's wrong, for so long we thought it was the manicures, the pedicures, the hair color, right? And then we're realizing that's extension of greatness, but for many of us, that's not providing that joy, that because then it's like a great extension, but it's not getting to that root. Like when we look for root cause and disease, it's not getting to that root of the joy. So so that comes back to that moment. Tanya, I'm really curious on your take of like, we're still having this conversation in self-care when we thought we had grappled with it at the beginning of the pandemic. For so many of us, we thought, oh my gosh, I have a handle on how I'm going to slow down. Do you remember all the conversations you probably had with yourself too?
Yes.
I had them, right? And here I am back again. I'm like, what the hell happened in the last 2 years? Like, so what is I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'm so curious because it just came to me. What is your interpretation of this discussion on, like, we're back in a place again where we took some lessons, we're carrying them, but why haven't we still taken that dance forward of this taking care of ourselves?
It's such a good question, Arti. And I think a lot of people are navigating that, right? Because again, it's going back to that change that we were talking about earlier, right? Things are changing again, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, things changed, things were different. We had to kind of adapt to a different way of life and what that looked like. And now it's happening again. And I think that's the one piece that we may not be acknowledging, that this is yet a new thing, right? Now we have to navigate it versus saying, okay, we're just going to go back to the way things were. Well, that's really highly unlikely, right? Like, or really difficult. So I think it's our lens in which we're like viewing it. Like, okay, now things are changing once again, new environment. And if taking care of ourselves is something that we've learned is really important and something that we do nurture, then how do we take that forward? Like, that's the conversation we need to be having. It's like, how do we incorporate this as we move forward versus it being an afterthought or it being something that that gets fit in, right? Like, if that's something that we've learned that is really, really important as we move forward, how do we incorporate it? Because things are constantly changing, but how do we make sure that that's something that's incorporated as we adapt to new things, right? And continue having these conversations. So like conversations like this one, or even just putting a lens on the need for it and that it can look different for everybody. I think is a big piece, and that might be the piece that the lens that we're not necessarily looking at as we go forward. I think we're very focused on how do we go back to normal, how do we make things go normal, look like normal, versus asking a different question. How do we take what we learned and incorporate it and adapt into the new things that are happening and the changes that we're encountering?
Thank you so much. You talk about how the ebbs and tides of change and what that means is critical. So Tanya, while we wrap up for today, can you share with everyone where they can find you, possibly when you might do your self-care workshop again, which is really awesomely done, and all of your points of contact?
Sure thing, Arti. Thank you so much. Yes, I do have a website. It's www.tanyajacleese.com. People can find me there. I also have a monthly newsletter, so they can subscribe to the newsletter on the website. I'm also on Instagram at Tanya Jacleese, and then also on LinkedIn, also Tanya Jacleese. And actually, I'm going to be doing the workshop again in February. So that is in the works, and I'll be sure to share more information about that as that opens up and as I open up registration for it.
Awesome. Tanya, thank you so much for the precious gift of your time in this conversation and continuation of this conversation, because it is, again, like I realize that it is a constant conversation to have. This is not a closed end conversation. It is an open book with many, many chapters, many, many lines, and it's okay. It is okay. I think that's what I'm realizing today. Like, it is okay. It's not going to be closed and defined ever. It will change, and just to roll with the punches.
I love that. I love that approach to it, Arti. Exactly. It's ongoing because, again, we're changing. What we need changes. Things ebb and flow, right? And what you need on vacation might be different than what you need when you're at home, right? So it's like acknowledging that too, and kind of going with the flow, and continuing to have the conversation so that you build that awareness and you give yourself what you need as you experience. I mean, at the end of the day, as you experience life, right?
Yes. Tanya, thank you so much.
Thank you, Arti. This has been so fun. This has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful week ahead, and live in joy by just being in the moment.